Hello everyone and welcome to today's Employer of Choice webinar on the topic of biotech talent trends in 2022. So today's session is going to be recorded and a link to the recording will be made available after the session. We would like this session to be as interactive as possible, and our panelists today have scheduled in some time at the end to pick up questions from the chat box, so please feel free to pop any questions in there. If I can ask you all to keep your microphones on mute throughout the discussion, that would be great. I'm now going to hand you over to Tom Froggett, who is the Managing Director at Singular Talent, and I hope you all enjoy the session.
Thanks very much, Jazz, and good afternoon, everyone. I know you said good morning. I usually do these in the morning, but good afternoon. Yes, we're gonna keep it very interactive. As Jasmine mentioned, we have a discussion piece for most of the session, where I'll be joined by Fiona, who I'll give an opportunity to introduce herself in just a second. I'm going to sort of lay the groundwork a little bit and set the context for the discussion, and talk a little bit about biotech talent trends in 2022, what we're seeing in the market, what I imagine many of you that are attending this session are seeing, but hopefully this will allow us to put some context around what is actually happening in talent in biotech, and we'll talk about some of the ways that you can use that to your advantage and that you can solve that challenge of talent this year. Just as an introduction, my name is Tom Froggett. I am the Managing Director of a company called Singular Talent, as Jazz mentioned. We are a talent acquisition company for the biotech sector. So we typically work with startup and early stage biotech companies from seed to post Series A, and we help them to hire primarily scientists, although it's a little broader than that. We help companies with the whole sort of talent acquisition piece, not just the recruitment. It's everything from figuring out what exists in your organization to setting values and culture pillars, through to employer branding, hiring processes, the hiring itself, and then into onboarding, pre-boarding. What do you do with the people when they arrive? So I'm going to try not to lean too much on that side of things today. We'll talk a bit about recruitment, of course, because that's a really relevant part of this discussion, but it won't solely be about hiring. We're going to talk about talent more broadly, in terms of the talent that already exists within your business as well. But because of what we do, I feel uniquely positioned really to talk about what is actually happening in the biotech talent market. You know, we work with several biotech companies in the UK primarily, and we help them to find people on a daily basis. So we're out there trying to identify top talent every day. So what are we seeing that is actually happening out there? Well, there's a few trends that are really clear to see. You will all have heard about the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, the Great Reorganization, whatever it's being called this week. But that underpinning that are really three key trends that we see. So the first is that we are very much in a candidate-driven marketplace. So this has always been the case to some extent in the biotech sector, primarily because the people that we look for are so specific. There are never very many of the individual that we're looking for, whether that's a medicinal chemist or a particular type of molecular biologist or whatever it might be. But certainly over the last 6 to 9 months, the market has shifted even more into that candidate-driven space. And when we say candidate-driven, essentially that means that the number of jobs exceeds the number of candidates. There are high levels of competition for talent. You know, we are seeing in the recruitment that we're doing that typically candidates, by the time they get to the point of making a decision about joining a company, will have a minimum of 2 offers, usually more like 3 or 4. So candidate confidence is high. People are confident in their ability to find not just a new job, but a good job. They're confident in their ability to enter the market and be in demand. And you know, once they're in there, you as an employer, as I say here, are facing high levels of competition. There's lots of people who are competing for the same talent as you are. And not just in the local area, as used to be the case. So it used to be that if you were located somewhere like Cambridge, for example, there was a huge amount of demand for local talent. However, because of remote working, because of flexible working, hybrid working, all the trends that you're all very aware of, I'm sure, you're now competing further afield. So there is a wider pool of competitors for a much tighter pool of candidates. So what that leads on to is that candidates are becoming more selective. As I say, they are receiving multiple offers, which means that they are holding out more for the perfect job. So whereas 12 months ago, we used to see that candidates would typically take a job that ticked 3 out of 5 boxes or 4 out of 5 boxes. Now people are holding out for the perfect one, which makes total sense, of course, if you think about the fact that as soon as they enter the market, they are given choice. They're approached by lots of people. There are lots of adverts out there. They're pursued by lots of people, and probably even before they enter the market in most cases as well. People like us are proactively getting in touch with passive talent, people who haven't decided to move yet but are dipping their toe in the water. And these options come to them very quickly as well. You know, we are seeing several occasions, I think 3 occasions just in the last month, where from a candidate entering the market and sending their CV to them having an offer, the time between those 2 things happening is less than 6 working days on 3 occasions. So not always the case. Sometimes it takes longer than that, obviously. But you can imagine if just a week into their job search, someone receives a job offer that's not the perfect thing, they feel under less pressure to accept that job offer than they would do if they were 3 months down the line and they were getting a bit tired of the whole thing. So people are being more selective and holding out for the perfect job. There's also an expectation of flexibility. I think flexible working, remote working, hybrid working, these are not things that are perceived as benefits by the people that you're trying to hire. In most cases, these are things that are perceived as expectations. So people are no longer willing to commute to the same extent that they used to. Now, don't get me wrong, some people prefer being in a physical location, but not all of the time, and certainly not at the hours that they're dictated to in most cases. So we've all grown used to that flexibility that we've seen over the last couple of years out of necessity. There is a perception as well that you're more productive when managing your own time and working remotely. There's conflicting research on that, but certainly that's the overwhelming sentiment, is that if we can be productive when managing our own time and managing our own location and hours, then why can't we be productive like that anymore? It's not a COVID thing, it's just a productivity thing. So if you are bringing people back into the office, that may be a choice that you make as a business, but keep this in mind, that there is an expectation of some level of flexibility from candidates. Doesn't mean you have to be entirely flexible and let people work whenever they want and wherever they want every single day. And of course, some jobs are less flexible inherently than others. If you're hiring people to be based in the lab, they need to come and sit in the lab and do experiments. But flexibility is not even something that will tip the balance in your favor. It's something that's expected from candidates. There's also a question among a lot of people around how they re-enter the physical workspace. So we've seen, of course, over the last few years that that formality in business has decreased. You can see that by what everyone wears on calls like this. People's kids in the background, you know, the sort of the humanization of work in some ways, if you like. But what that's also meant is people are able to be themselves a lot more. And if they have to put on a professional face for a Zoom call for an hour, that's very easy to do. If they have to do it for a whole day every day, there is sometimes this anxiety around how people re-enter the physical workplace. What's expected? What are the norms? How do people behave now? How safe is it as well? Some people have been a lot more cautious than others during the course of the pandemic. So this is something that people are asking, and it's a genuine question that that candidates are posing to us about expectations of employers as they get back into the workplace. How accepting will they be of who I really am, because I've spent the last 2 years bringing who I really am with me to work. And with all this in mind, because it's harder to hire people, a lot of companies are starting to realize that they also, at the same time as hiring people, need to focus on retention. So jobs are easier to leave and people are harder to replace. When which makes that equation much more balanced in favor of the individual rather than the company. We're also seeing that companies are proactively targeting passive job seekers, so those who haven't actively decided to leave yet. We spend probably about 75–80% of our time speaking to people in that phase of their decision making. Those people can be swayed with counteroffers, and typically there is a reason that they're considering leaving a company, even if they haven't quite got to deciding to leave yet. So if you catch them early enough in that decision making process, you can convince them to stay. Whether that's a financial counteroffer or not, there's other things that go into a counteroffer. Those you can't save, it's going to take you longer to replace. So notice periods should reflect market conditions. Now, we're seeing 3 months become the norm and have been for the last few years. But some employers are going even further than that. Now, there is a question over how productive that becomes. If you've got someone in a 6-month notice period, how much are you going to get out of them for the last 4 months of that? But if you're still operating on 2-week or 1-month notice periods, that may be something you want to review. And what it really boils down to is that because people have options, because there's lots of demand out there, if the people in your business don't feel valued, don't feel comfortable in your environment and with your people and in your culture and excited about the work they're doing, they will walk. So before I launch into the discussion part of the conversation, and I'm going to bring Fiona into this in just a second, the landscape is essentially that we are coming out of a period of significant global change. Everything in the world has changed over the last 2 years, as you all well know. What that's meant is that particularly now, more than ever before, you are always competing for talent. And what I mean by always is not just when you're hiring them, but when they're with you as well. Even if they've been with you for a very long time, those people who are busying themselves away in the corner and have been doing for the last 5 years and are cracking on with their job and who you think are probably pretty happy, everybody else is looking into your business saying, I want that person. So you're always competing for that talent, even when you think they're bought in and safe. We've seen so many companies start up from 2020 onwards who are of these times. These are companies that have started in a pandemic, companies that have started with remote working as the norm, companies that have started with flexibility, global talent pools, and new ways of working as the norm. If you are not one of those companies, then your competitors may well be more attuned to what people need today than you are. And so it's important that you get on board with that and understand what the people you're trying to hire need and are looking for. And the people in your business, their expectations have changed about what their employers provide to them. So this leads me on to my next point, that expectations that people have of work and of employers have changed as well. It's a whole big discussion around this. But people have reassessed priorities. People have put money worries lower down the priority list. People have put career progression lower down the priority list. And we've seen this through some independent research that we've done. So it's important to reassess, what is important to your people and the people you're trying to bring in. People have choice to stay with you or not, but also to join you or not. You're not the only show in town in most cases. And so what talent acquisition, talent retention, success in the talent marketplace is really about these days, or in 2022, I should say, is about creating a place that people really want to work, whether those people are already with you or not, and whether you're trying to attract them into your business or they're already there. So creating a place that people really want to work is really what the objective is for most companies. And this is regardless of sector, but it's certainly true in the biotech sector. So with that in mind, I'd like to bring Fiona Mcgonagall into the discussion, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. So Fiona, if you can unmute yourself if you're not already and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Tom. I think I've done both. Thank you for that overview. It's been interesting to see that, given that the pressures on talent. But for anyone that won't know me, my name's Fiona Mcgonagall, and I've got quite a varied background from talent and skills. So I started off life in further education and then ended up in regional government for a LEP combined authority, leading on skills and careers education. And then, of course, now, as some of you can see, there's a new building behind me, we are developing and building a new university for Peterborough, which is part of Anglia Ruskin University. And of course, with everything that we've been doing, industry has been at the centre of all that, because we don't want to be seen as the traditional university that opens the doors and is about just getting a degree, but not linked with where the jobs are and where the skill sets are. So this is why it's key to be speaking to people like yourself, because we want to be one of those solutions and a talent generator, going hand in hand with partners in recruitment to support them. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, fantastic. So my first question, I guess, for you, Fiona, is just leading on from the trends that I've just mentioned. What are you seeing out there? Are you seeing anything different to what we're talking about, or what is the perspective you would have on what's happening in talent this year?
Yes, the big resignation is certainly a massive discussion. The whole work-life balance that people have been chasing for years, it's been talked about in all the time I've been in employment. And now that people have had a taste of it through the pandemic, they want to hang on to that. And I think that's the real issue and challenge people have had. There's, pre-pandemic, there's been a skill shortage across key sectors like the life sciences sector. But also, as a result of that, now people can move around and they're not happy to get into an hour-and-a-half journey on a train and an hour-and-a-half back and maybe not get a seat and maybe not being able to pick up the kids from nursery or going to little Johnny's football match after school. And, it's all that seems to be adding to, it's not always about money, it's that work-life balance. Now that people have got it, they want to keep it. And so that's the big issue. And so we've talked a lot about agile working pre-pandemic, but agile working is certainly now the key word. It needs to be agile, and it needs to be, and you've said it really as a key point in this, it's an expectation now from talent. It's not, oh, it's an added extra, oh, it'd be nice if I get it. It's what they want.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And any observations about what flexibility, I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, right? But what flexibility means to people, or what work-life balance means to people? Because I think sometimes I have a couple of thoughts on this, but I think sometimes there's a disconnect between what companies think work-life balance is and what people think work-life balance is.
Yeah, that's very true. I think businesses have often thought it was always monetary. And again, you've touched on that, haven't you? But it's not always the financial piece. It is about being able to decide, it's decisions, because sometimes people feel it's put on them. There was a phrase from government that was said, get off your pelotons and get back to work, for civil servants. And again, that's not the mantra that you want in reinforcing and retaining a workforce. So for years, I've worked with workforces across every sector. And because I've worked in further education previously, businesses used to look after the talent coming in, your young apprentices, the new recruits, but they'd tend to ignore the current staff and not really upskill them or train them or support them. And also that was another pressure. And again, we can see that now, that people are saying, well, who's valuing me more and what's my purpose? And if they don't get that, then, it is making them walk easier into one of their competitors.
Yeah, and I think it's, I sort of brushed past this in the introduction bit, but it's much easier for people to leave now, not just because there's choice, right? But there is, but also, I suppose we've shifted from a world where you had to put your head up and look around, right? You had to go and look for a job. You had to know a headhunter, or they had to find you somehow, and it was harder to find people. People are getting approached all the time, and so even those people, sometimes we speak to people here who haven't even thought about looking for a job, but they've had a really bad week and their boss said something to them that they really didn't like, and they felt undervalued, and maybe they've just finished a big project that they're really proud of and nobody congratulated them and they feel underappreciated. There's so many different reasons that people start to look, but then suddenly they get a message that evening about this company over here are looking for people just like you. And of course, we as recruiters make them feel special, right? We make them feel valued. We make them feel in demand because they're difficult to find, these people. I think it's dangerous for companies to be complacent about the people that are in their business, because it's that person that you think is safe bet, the person who you think you don't have to worry about, that will turn around and leave if they get offered something better. And I think we've got to remember that it's a transaction, right? If from a business's point of view, a business partnership wasn't working, they would end that partnership. So now you've got to think about it that from an individual's point of view, the balance of power has shifted. They feel more empowered to make those moves and make those choices. If it's not working for them, they're just going to go.
Well, I would agree with that, because I'm a prime example of somebody who moved jobs in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So at the height of the pandemic, I worked for regional government for a combined authority, leading on skills, and everything was just writing board papers and press releases and managing, contracts up to £20 million of contracts and trying to move them online, managing external teams and internal teams. And at the peak of the pandemic, for the first lockdown, I was working 80 to 100 hours a week. And that's no exaggeration. I was working to 2 a.m, because every day I was working on emails to 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night with meetings and emails, and then I'd write board papers. And it just became ridiculous that I wasn't getting that. And I was looking at everyone outside getting their hours walk and people on furlough and thinking, wow, I wasn't getting and seeing what I'm benefiting from that. So it did make me think there must be more to this, because there was no let up in the pandemic and how we were working. So I've moved as a result of that, but also I've been advised by a colleague who also, he's Australian. He's now announced that he's gone back to Australia with his family and got a brilliant job there, because I think it's given people time to think, well, what is important to me? Family that I couldn't see ordinarily because of stopping them. And the ability as well to be working online, and continuing that as well. It's been forced on us, but it's been a brilliant addition to the working environment, because I always had a national role, and I wouldn't have thought twice about jumping in the train I'm based in Cambridge, jumping in the train to London or going up to Sheffield or Manchester. But now it's like, oh, what's its purpose? And if it's an hour meeting, I'm not going to just jump in the train and go. So it's all of those things. And I think a lot of businesses are probably saving money with people who aren't having meaningless journeys if they can do them online as well, travel expenses.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I apologize, by the way, if my camera's flickering a little bit. I think I've got a bit of a hardware issue here. But yeah, no, I agree. I think it's priorities have shifted, as you say. And I think, I know that for us, we simplified everything, right? We just reduced the amount of stuff we were doing because there was nothing to do. And then suddenly you realize, oh, I didn't need to do all these things. I didn't need to buy all this stuff, or I didn't, it might be if you're not driving into work, you don't need to compete in the company car park anymore, right? Or you don't need to have quite as high-end a car, or as, as designer clothes, or whatever it might be, whatever you spend your money on, right? I think the contract changed and the financial incentive changed, because suddenly people were seeing, it wasn't so much the case in biotech because there wasn't so many redundancies, there was some, but suddenly I think people realize, well, what am I trading my time for? What is the payoff here? And it's not all about money, but it's there's a heavy element of what am I in this for and what am I getting out of it. I think people want to work still. I don't think that's changed. They want to do good work, and I'm firmly of the opinion, as I'm sure many people on this call are, that most people really want to do a good job, and they want to contribute to something, and they want to be good at stuff, and they want to do well in whatever context that is. I think the other thing we're seeing is that the impact of work, or the impact of the work people are doing, has become much more important to them. And this is up and down the spectrum, right? I'm sure you see it with the work you're doing at the university, but this is from people who are just starting out in their career through to executives. And I think later on in people's careers, as they became more financially secure, it was always something that people started to think about more. But this is from the beginning now, that this idea of purpose and what impact am I having and what difference am I making has become more prevalent. I don't know if there's anything you're seeing there.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind with me is, as we all know, that there's been sectors that have been, shall we say, that they've had negative effect, and they've had huge redundancies. And then there's other sectors that are growth sectors like life sciences, for instance. But it's almost like the mismatch between those who made redundant. And again, it was a huge part of my role within the combined authority to try and support people made redundant, transition them into where those growth sector jobs are. And I do believe that it's something as a sector that we need to be working together, us as education providers, recruitment companies, with the businesses, looking at what their needs are, but also looking at where the talent is, and that's across all spectrums. And even the very fact, and I know we touched on it previously with, I know it's been said, people with disabilities or people who don't feel themselves, and I know you touched on that in your presentation, that I've had people saying to me, you know, I've got a disability and people don't know it because they just see me on screen and working from online. And I know that the feedback from people who have hidden disabilities like autism or, you know, something to that effect, where it might affect them interviewing well and not getting the job. So there needs to be other ways that people look and see, well, actually, how can I look past the general stream where I look and get my recruitment from, and look at other people that they wouldn't ordinarily look to, because this is a huge growth sector, and I think that we need to do more to support that sector, as well as the supporting sectors like advanced manufacturing, where there needs to be enablers to be enabling the sector to thrive in certain manufacturing elements of that as well. So it's almost like the local supply chains has always been a discussion as well. You know, notoriously, especially NHS trusts, they would go internationally, they go globally to look for markets instead of looking at local markets. And I've had huge frustration from SMEs in particular to say, we've got a product here, but the NHS won't entertain us because of how they dealt with things. But of course, as we know, the pandemic has demonstrated that we can't rely on what's outside our own borders. It needs to be local supply chains, but also there's the net zero piece and green and greening jobs and green skills and what that looks like. So it's an ethical thing as well as you know, it's a supply issue, and we know that we've got things on our doorstep, but it's making sure we're tapping into all that and being more open to hearing about it, and having more of an open door policy to say, actually, I will listen, I won't feel sold to, because again, there's that whole old-fashioned way of I'm going to be sold to, but I'm here to listen, and if it's not something I want, then don't be offended. But I'm still in that space and creating that safe space, really, something we want to do at the university as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think picking up on your point there about looking where you perhaps wouldn't have looked before, I think is really interesting. So this is something that I've talked about a lot for several years now, and it sometimes makes me quite unpopular with HR and talent people, which I understand why, but essentially, you know, we spend all our time in the pharma and biotech sector, so this is relevant elsewhere as well. But we work in these industries that they pride themselves on innovation, right? They pride themselves on doing things differently, on thinking differently, on being new. However, in a lot of cases, they hire from the same universities, the same courses, the same postdoc labs, the same companies. You know, they hire from their competitors, almost across the board. I mean, I often have conversations with companies who are, for example, looking for marketing people, but they have to be from the sector. Or they're looking for finance people and they have to be from the sector. And there are some reasons for that. I'm not saying that's entirely invalid. There are regulated industries like this one, of course, and knowledge of that environment and that regulation is sometimes important, but that doesn't mean everybody has to come from that background. And so, you know, we've obviously seen a lot of publicity or a much higher profile for diversity, equality, inclusion over several years now. It's not just about diversity of gender or diversity of sexuality or diversity of identity or race or anything like that. It's, you know, it's also about diversity of background and experience, and you know, looking at where else you can find people from, because I think anyone coming into a new company is going to have to learn some stuff, right? Now, in some cases, you might want them to come and plug in straight away, and you can't compromise on that, and that's fair enough. That's sometimes the case, but I think often it actually wouldn't be any more work teaching someone from an entirely different background to do a job than it would teaching someone from an entirely different company, but the same sector and the same sort of role. So it's a really interesting point. I think, you know, looking further afield, not just geographically, and I know we've had a question about this, which we will come back to in a minute, but in terms of what do you actually need someone to do, and what do you need them to know on day one, and what do you need them to be able to do before they walk in? Not what did you hire last time?
Yeah, I think Stats as well has suggested by 2030, at least 90% of the existing jobs and workforce will need some type of retraining or reskilling. And even the pandemic has demonstrated that we've had to be, you know, teaching ourselves how to be working online and that agile piece. So that's a huge amount. And of course, with my previous bit, at the Combined Authority, at the start of the lockdown, just before it, I was awarded some funding from the Department for Education in the February 2020. Little did we know what was coming after that, but I was asked to be one of the pilot areas in the UK to pilot a national retraining scheme model. And out of the 5, the Department for Education then would pick which model they would use. However, the pandemic happened, and of course I started trying to create this, and again, another reason why I was so busy. But of course we had to shelf it, but it's something I'm looking to remodel within the university, because retraining, reskilling, upskilling is a huge part of that. And it is about accessing new avenues, new talent streams where you wouldn't look ordinarily before, and taking displaced sectors like your hospitality and retail and places like that, where there is people who I've experienced have come out with great backgrounds, great experience, but they've landed themselves into a temporary job. It's not a career. And so we need to try and take those people and really push them into sectors where they're needed and where they can be retrained into, and not they've worked in the sector previously and then they're moving around, because it's the small pool to be competing for and they're all fishing in the same pool. So it's about diversifying where you're looking, and he or she who shouts the loudest about the opportunities that they're opening the door to will really strengthen that. And this is what the model that I was looking to create, and what I will continue to create, a retraining model, a retraining scheme.
It's a really good point. And I think, you know, as you say, the skills that we will need in the future don't necessarily exist in the numbers that we need them, right? So we can't just rely on everybody else to train those people. And we've got to take some of that responsibility ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to be competing for an ever decreasing pool of people. And, you know, it's the right thing to do, but also it's the right business thing to do, because otherwise the cost just keeps spiraling and it becomes untenable, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I will say something controversial as well, from my point of view, and where I'm working. Like I say, I've worked around the skills and education, further education and apprenticeship system for a long time, and now I'm in higher education. And I think that businesses are central to everything that universities should be doing. Some universities do it well, some have a long way to go in terms of not just churning out people with degrees, not just churning out students who are well educated, but actually they should be future workforce, future ready, if you like. And so, as I have described myself, coming into higher education as a positive disruptor, to disrupt what's already existing and what needs to come in and be there, and listening to employers to be central to everything that we're doing. We need to make sure that employers are part of the whole piece that we're working on, so that we are almost like that recruitment force, that we are creating the opportunities, working with recruitment companies like yourself who have employers on your books that really want to fill these jobs, instead of students sleepwalking into jobs that aren't right for them. Because there's many, and again, it's something I see within universities, is students, because they're doing one degree, they think it should be linked with this types of sector, instead of getting students to think more broadly about, actually, have you ever thought about going into this sector, this sector, this sector? And again, it's something that I'm trying to instill into the work that we're doing within the university now, across all of Anglia Ruskin, to make sure that we are getting people who ordinarily they come out with a degree, but it doesn't necessarily land them a job. Well, why is that? So then we expose them to sectors like this. We expose them to say, actually, I know you're doing a degree in, something over here, but would you not think to look at this sector? Your degree can really add value to that. Maybe you just need a bolt-on of a CPD, micro-credential, some type of reskilling or upskilling on top of the degree you've got. So that's something that we should be more mindful of, and something that we're really trying to get right at the minute.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And I've seen the questions, by the way, that have been coming through. So if you've asked the question, we will come to it. Thank you very much. There's some really good questions in there, which we will pick up. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the challenges, and we want to give some practical stuff for people to take away as well. So I guess what are you seeing working, Fiona? What are you seeing companies doing that is positive, that is good, that's helping them to attract and retain talent, not just at the entry level, but at all levels in their career? I know you're focused mostly on graduates, but what do you see? Feel free to name names or not, it's entirely up to you, but what do you see companies doing well?
Well, again, it's part of my controversial bit that I didn't say. When I speak to an employer, it's not just about graduates, and it's not just about what the university can offer them. It's about who I know in the sector, within further education, within other higher education institutes. It should be about what the business needs are. And if we as an institute don't offer it, we know somebody who does. And again, because I've worked around the sector, that's something we should be creating and will be creating at ARU, so that businesses aren't sitting going, oh, I need to go to 5 different places to try and serve these needs for an innovation project or a postgraduate student or an internship or whatever. They can get multiple things from us, but they still have different levels of need. And of course, that could be into our colleges across the region as well, which I've got strong links with. And we should be making sure that we're not being protectionist and thinking, oh, I don't want to connect you with them or speak to them, because it's central to what we should be doing. So with regards to the point, I can use the example of a solution that we see as working is a model that I created for the development of the new university. Is we've been engaging with 170 businesses have helped us co-design the brand new curriculum offer at the university for Peterborough, which opens its doors in September coming. And so I say 170 businesses because I set up sector interest groups, and I set up 13 of those across all different sectors, from construction to life sciences to business and entrepreneurship, agri-tech, sustainability, all those different sectors. And in some of these sector interest groups, we had 30 plus businesses come. And you said we did approach, looking at the curriculum that our academics created, but also getting them to say, well, what would a graduate look like? And getting the businesses to tell us, actually, that's old hat, that's not going to work, we need this. And it's been such a meaningful process that businesses are, clambering to be supporting and working with us on that. And it's been positive because they now feel like they own the curriculum. They now feel like they've been part of that, and they're excited to be involving with that. And the reason I say it's positive is because that same model now is going to be rolled out across all of the wider campuses across Anglo Ruskin University, because we have the benefit of having a blank canvas with a brand new university, a startup. So we're not tied down to what exists. We could create something new. And so this is going to be rolled out into Cambridge, Chelmsford, and London campuses as a positive to bring industry closer. Because often universities have quite ad hoc, we've got a need, we'll pull maybe 5 or 6 employers in, but we should be pulling them in en masse and hearing where the demand is, not just the loudest 5 voices, because that doesn't tell you what demand is. It should be a multitude of diverse people across the sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I suppose not throwing your hands in the air as a business and going, well, there's no one out there, we can't find anyone, but it's thinking, well, how actually can we create a pipeline of people that have the skills that we need? Maybe it's not going to solve our problem today, but if we don't start solving this problem that we have today, this is going to continue to be a problem forever. So the best thing we could have done was do this 20 years ago, but the second best thing we could do is start doing it today, right? So
I like it.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions that we've had that I think would be really good to pick up on here. So Hilda has asked, do you expect companies to focus more on international recruitment to solve shortages of talent? I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. I mean, the short answer is yes. But there's a couple of other things that I'd say. I think as Fiona's been talking about, yes, I would encourage anyone to look in places they wouldn't normally look. And part of that is geographically, definitely. If you can be flexible with the way that you work, then there are certainly people either in sort of locations within country that you wouldn't normally consider, who are sort of, you know, if you're in Cambridge, for example, or London, there's people in Dundee who might be really interested in working for your business, but also across geographical boundaries. I think there are complexities with employing people in different countries. There are tax implications for both parties. There are employment law challenges to navigate and contractual things, and all this has to be taken into account because it can be a lot of work. I've worked with a company recently who have they transitioned to a fully remote model at the beginning of the pandemic, and they've been recruiting people. They're a UK-based company. They've been recruiting people in Ireland, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, in the US. Some countries are easier to hire people in than others, and it can be very expensive. You know, we quoted them for hiring someone in Switzerland, not to pay us, but we scouted some employment lawyers for them. It would have cost them about £35,000 a year just to employ one person in Switzerland. Now, on top of someone's salary and all the other employment costs that go along with that, that becomes a lot more money, right? So there are complexities to international talent. Although, yes, I do expect companies to lean more on that if they have a business that can support that kind of working. But yeah, as Fiona's been saying, I think you want to think a bit more laterally than that as well, and think about, okay, so we typically look for people from within this industry. What are the related industries? What are the skills we need for this job? And where else do people demonstrate those skills? Maybe not 100% of them, maybe 70 or 80% of them, and we can train the rest. But I think, yeah, international recruitment will become more of a thing, but there's other places to think about as well. I don't know if you'd add anything on the point of international recruitment there, Fiona.
I was just going to say again, because universities attract a lot of international students, we actually pull through from 185 countries, believe it or not, as a university. So we have students from across that. And again, there's an expectation that students can get a placement and potentially then go on to have employment. So, you know, they've got the backing of a university that can help with that, because of course there's visa restrictions, but there is that whole piece around that as well, the complexities. But as a university, we might be able to help a bit more, make that easier for you, and whether it's a short term or a longer term recruit, you know, so there's that as well.
Yes, good point. Lauren has asked a very good question here. Thank you very much, Lauren. If you're already allowing total flexibility, both in location and working patterns, what else can you look at to retain all levels of staff, salary aside? It's the perennial question. I do have some thoughts on this, so I'm not just going to throw it back to people. But you know, interestingly, you say salary aside. Salary is not the thing that would convince people to stay in most cases. Particularly if you think, you've asked about all levels of career. You know, you've got to think that particularly as you move up your company, salary becomes less important to people most of the time. People become more financially secure as they progress in their career, in most cases, unless they have a shopping habit or, you know, whatever it might be. It's other things that people look for. So I have a sort of perspective on this, and we are doing a lot of research around this to sort of substantiate it at the moment. But anecdotally, what I see in terms of the shift in people's priorities with their careers is that they are expecting different things from their employers than they were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 3 years ago, right? Flexibility is a key thing, but you've talked about already allowing all that flexibility. I think it's great if you are doing that. But people aren't just looking for a flexible, they're not just going to do anything that's flexible. You know, there's three things that I think are fundamental to the role that employers and companies will play in people's lives in the future. And I think it's these three things that will make places attractive to work, because that's what we're really talking about. We're really talking about how do you make your business a really attractive place for someone to work, whether they're already there or not. Those three things are, first of all, being part of something bigger than themselves. There being a clear mission, a clear purpose, a clear direction to what they're doing, a clear contribution, a clear impact that they will make. if you are in the biotech sector or the life sciences sector, that becomes easier, right? There's an inherent benefit to the work that you're doing most of the time, a healthcare benefit. But in any sector, you can find that purpose and that direction. But it's really important to articulate that to people. So what is the bigger mission that they're going to be contributing to? And then what is their role within that? What's the impact that they will have? What's their individual contribution to that? We've got to make sure that's really, really clear to people. And whether that's impact on patients, whether that's impact on people in general, whether that's impact on the world, whether that's impact on a really small group of people, but a big impact, that's fine. You know, you might bring someone into a leadership role whose main impact is on the people within your company. That's also fine if they're making a big enough difference to the people that they're working with. So, so purpose and being part of something bigger and being part of a mission is really, really crucial. Some companies are very good at that. So if you've already done that, then good, communicate it, talk to people about it regularly. I think the second key thing that companies, or the second key role that companies will play in the future is as a hub of learning and development. So we're long past the days where people should be going to work, starting working and stopping learning, right? People's work should be a way that they develop themselves, their career, their skills, their outlook on life, their everything about themselves. We see that, so we run a survey every year, and this is focused on the biotech sector. It's primarily scientists in the biotech sector, where we look at all the people we've interviewed in that past year, and why they would move jobs. What are the key drivers for them to move jobs? Usually there's a combination of factors, but we try and identify the most important one to each person. Career development has been the #1 driver of career moves for the last 5 years. Now it's shifted up and down slightly in importance, but it's been by far the #1 driver of career movement. So first thing is make it clear to people that there is a path for them, that there is a development route for them, that there is somewhere to go, particularly when people have been in their job for 9 to 15 months. You know, it's at that point that they really understand how to do the job. So they've got to start thinking about what's next and where do they take it. Now, when I talk about career development, I'm not always talking about people moving into more senior roles. Not everybody wants that, but most people want to develop and do something different, or do something more, or take on more, whatever that might mean to them. So that's essential, and being really clear about what the opportunity is for people is really key. The nuance with the career progression thing is that people leave jobs for career reasons, not necessarily because there's no opportunity where they are, but because they're not clear on what that opportunity is or how they take it. So, so being clear about what that opportunity looks like is important. And then, of course, you've got to support people's learning and development to take those opportunities. So again, I think this is where companies will play a key role. Both, it's not just about sending people on courses, it's about putting them into stretch assignments, putting them into different jobs. You know, as Fiona, you were talking about earlier, putting them into things that they don't know how to do. If you look at big corporations, that's what they do. They take people who have a lot of potential and they go, okay, so you are a marketing person. We're going to put you in charge of this R&D group because we think you got loads of potential and we think you can do it, and we'll teach you how to do it and you'll have to learn all about it, but we're going to put you in charge of this R&D group. And then when you've done a good job of that, we're going to move you to be country manager of South Africa. And then they move them into these places where they have lots of different experiences that they're trying to create a CEO of the future, basically. But development is crucial. Mentoring, coaching, all these kinds of things come into that. And then I think the final part, and apologies, Fiona, I will come to you in just a second. But
this is all relevant.
The final part, the third key role that I think companies will play in the future for people is as a method or a platform for social engagement, right? You know, we've all seen over the last couple of years that the importance that work plays in our social lives, or the gap that it leaves when it's not there, particularly. If you hire people, not necessarily based on having similar backgrounds, which is a whole big topic. We could do a lot on this. I won't go into that. but based around values and based around wanting to contribute to something, then you will have people that align on certain topics or certain areas, but who have widely divergent experiences and opinions and points of view and perspectives. So companies can create that social hub where not only do they give people a reason to talk to each other, but they give people from wildly different backgrounds a reason to talk to each other who may never meet each other or may never engage with each other in any other way. So that for me, and again, we're doing a lot of research at the moment to substantiate this. So this is all theory at the moment based on what I see from our conversations with people and what I see businesses doing. But those three things for me are the things that you can do to retain your staff. If you can do those things, if you can, yes, be flexible, but also, and look, when I say salary is not important, you've got to be competitive. You've got to pay people what they're worth, and you've got to compensate people fairly. But if you can do those things, if you can provide development, progression, career opportunities, support, learning opportunities, and role model learning, that's really key. If you can give people something to be part of, something that's bigger than them, and something that they can't do on their own and that they can contribute to, that will go a long way in your favor. And if you can provide that social connection to the people around them. Now, this isn't about necessarily them going out for drinks every Thursday or anything like that. You know, this is about meaningful conversations with people that they wouldn't normally engage with. I think those are the things you can do to retain people. And then everybody's different, right? You've got to get to know your individual people and what's important to them. That is a very long answer to what was a relatively short question, Lauren. It's something I'm quite passionate about. So I hope that was useful. Fiona, please, anything else you'd contribute there?
No, if I'm honest, I think I was nodding there because I think you've covered everything that I would expect to hear. You know, the learning and development is key, the career development, you know, progression. People need to know they're going somewhere. They're not just staying stuck. If they're staying stuck, then that's a big indicator that they're going to walk, because if there's nowhere for them to go but stay still, then that's, you know, you lose people that way. And culture as well, as you've talked about quite a bit. So yeah, lifelong learning.
The only other thing I'd mention, and we touched on this, we did a bit of prep yesterday for those who are on this call, and Fiona, we touched on this yesterday, is that there's good retention and there's bad retention, you know, and I think the bar for that has changed. Obviously, as a company, you don't want to lose good people, and that's understandable. But the reality is that some people will be part of your journey for 20 years, and some people will be part of your journey for 6 months. And that doesn't mean that 6 months isn't a valuable 6 months. And of course, you don't want to lose people for the wrong reasons. But I think we do have to accept a little bit that people's feelings towards their employers are not what they were 30 years ago. You know, it's not necessarily a bad thing that they've moved on. It actually gives you an opportunity to refresh what's happening in that role or in that department or in that person's job. So yes, retention is important, but you will probably continue to lose people at a higher rate than anyone did 10 years ago, because it's just the way the world is now. Any other thoughts, Fiona? Any other questions from the group? I think we've got 5 minutes left. So anything that anyone wanted to talk about?
Was there any more questions in the group? I don't know. I wasn't.
Not at the moment, no, but
okay.
we're happy to take any more.
I would just agree with the lifelong learning piece as well, because I think when, you know, not like it was years ago when, you know, again, I've headed up careers education and, you know, instilling it into young people that this is their career journey, but also instilling into them that the job that you take now is not going to be the job you're going to have in 5, 10, 15 years, because people move. Like years ago, if you go into banking, it was a job for life. Yeah. Now people are, you know, taking those transferable skills. And again, a point that I'm using at the moment is skills should be used as a currency and not just seen as, you know, what you see on a CV isn't always what you're getting. And it should be the transferable skills, not just the typical, this is what I expect to see on a CV, this is what I expect in my sector, but it's the added value that people bring with them from other sectors and they're giving you that outside perspective, bringing that in, as opposed to just keeping it within. And that's how innovation is more key, and how it works when you're cross referring sectors and they're working more closely together. A lot more innovation does happen, and again, that's the space that we're looking to create within that as well. So it's looking at those skills and using that currency to kind of say, actually, I see this as more than what the job advert says or the job description says. Actually, you're bringing more to me, even though you don't have this, this, and this. You're actually bringing something else extra that I didn't think of before.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And as you say, you know, innovation very much happens at the boundaries, right? It happens in the intersections between things. And you might intersect two things that nothing comes from, but you never quite know. You know, it's worth putting those people in a room together, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, and can I just put a shout out, because this is about talent, and I know we touched on it yesterday, but members probably know Cambridge University Health Partners and the 2050 vision that's been created there to make sure that Cambridge and Cambridgeshire more widely is staying globally relevant to the talent and skills sector and innovation that's happening, especially as a result of the pandemic. But anyway, we're working with Cambridge University Health Partners, leading on the talent pillar there. And we've got 4 workshops that we want businesses, people like yourselves, to input into, very much like the discussion we're having here, but a bit more interactive, that we're having 3 in person and then 1 online, where we'd like to get feedback to create that talent pillar that links with place, that links with innovation, and links with data and on all the other indicators that really support the health and life sciences sectors. So if you're interested, and if Jazz is okay to give my email, then people can contact me and I can send them the calendar invite and details.
Fabulous. So to wrap up, yes, the question that we've got in here, just a final, yes, I can send you a link to the webinar where we talk about the reasons people move jobs. And yes, the research we're doing will be made public once it's done. That'll be later in the year. The only other thing I want to say is, if you are, as most people on this call probably are, involved in talent acquisition, recruitment, talent attraction, it's hard. We get it. We know. We feel for you. I see it. I'm doing it every day. It is tough out there, but people are moving jobs. If you're working at a company, there must be something good about it. So people will want to come and work there. Just keep going. It is hard, but keep going.
Thank you, Tom. I just want to say a huge thank you to you both, Tom and Fiona, for such an interesting session and for sharing such practical insights. It was really, really useful for me, and I hope that everybody attended today found it just as useful. And thank you to everybody that did join and stuck around to the end. There were some really great questions, so thank you so much. We will be sending you the Singular Talent Biotech Talent Trends report after this session, and I'm sure both Tom and Fiona would be more than happy for you to get in touch with them after the session. But, we're happy to pass on contact details and things like that. And yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Jazz. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks.